Let's talk about EDI and some of the things with the manual processes versus full automation, how to find the right balance in EDI. So, one of the things that I always try to tell everybody is listen, no matter what, you should always look for automating as much as possible. Okay. There's always going to be requirements that your trading partners are going to put onto you and they're going to ask you for. So, one of the examples that I can say is when you're dealing with an 855. Okay, so an 855 is a purchase order acknowledgement. So you receive a purchase order, 850. You want to send back an 855 to acknowledge what you can actually ship and handle on that actual purchase order. Okay, so when we're using this and we're looking at things, the 855 should acknowledge automatically what can be shipped, what can be handled, what products you have, all of those things in regards to that 850 that you received. Well, a lot of companies and a lot of organizations I have found are not able to do that in an automated fashion. And the reason they're not able to do that is maybe their inventory levels aren't correct. Maybe something else is going on in their system, but they can't say, hey, we can accept all items, or our system is set up to automatically respond with the information that we already have contained. You know, the ship dates of when orders can be shipped, or again, confirming quantities, confirming a price. Some things can't be handled in an automated fashion. So then what ends up happening is now you have human intervention. So you have to rely on somebody to actually go in, look at, okay, what physical quantity do we have of our items? Because maybe our inventory management's not correct. And now, can we fulfill? Because do we know if our carrier or our own trucks can get the products there by a certain expected ship date? Does the pricing look correct? Because maybe we don't have customer pricing set up correctly. So as you can see, there's some difficulty in automating that because you're relying on somebody to do it. All right. So why this topic matters, it's the impact of EDI efficiency on business operations. You know, so when you're thinking of the things and you're thinking of, you know, what is full automation versus the need of human oversight? Look at your processes and see, do you have things that people have to do in order for an order to process or in order for a claim to process, that you can't automate that piece because lack of things in your process, lack of things in your systems that you have in place, lack of things that you have incorporated as a business. So individuals talking to each other maybe almost never do a physical inventory count. Maybe the price levels and the comparisons the salesperson has in their head. As crazy as it sounds, there's companies that are out there that are like that. So let's understand what pieces of the manual EDI processes. What are manual for EDI? Where's the human intervention? Where's the document processing, the data entry, and the error handling? Why is it important? It's important because we want to limit as much human intervention as possible. We want to automate it. That's what EDI is for. That's what our clients are, or not clients, our trading partners are looking for. Our trading partners are looking for this to be automated. If they wanted human intervention, they would still do it and handle it through email, through you going to a portal, all of those things. So what can we get towards that automation? What can we do to limit the human intervention? Is there a product we need to add? Is there somebody's, mind that we need to sit down with and go, hey, why? Can we put this pen to paper? And can we put these rules into a system and in place and set up conditions, maybe in our mapping? Maybe using lookups in the mapping that we do? How can we do it? And when you're going through this process and you're figuring out where are those deficiencies? Is the human intervention? You're going to write it all down. And then maybe you need to meet with an organization like ours that can consult you and can say, hey, listen, there's some products that maybe, or different ways of your mapping, depending on the products that you're already utilizing. Or, hey, maybe if your provider is not able to do these things, maybe you should be looking at a different provider. Because again, we want to get away from those user errors, user intervention, and get it more of a machine, computer, programming, mapping, those type of things. Because the more we can rely on automation, the less we're going to have issues. Examples of manual EDI tasks is manually uploading and downloading EDI files. So communication. Hey, can you use AS2? Maybe you can schedule FTP or SFTP. What can we do so that somebody, again, isn't intervening in our way of processing? Where are we having to do manual data entry? Like, are we going into a portal, manually entering information or rekeying information between two different systems? Why? Where's the deficiency? What can we correct? What can we handle? Are we having to manually review and correct errors? If you're doing these things where people are human intervention, there's an issue. You should have as much of it handled through automation. There's some pros and some cons. The pros of manual processes, you have more control, more oversight. You're making sure pricing's flowing correctly. You're doing all of those things. Again, that's not what EDI is truly in place for. Maybe it's easier to handle those exceptions and not have to worry about doing customizations because you're using a manual process. So that's a pro. Maybe you're saving money. Lower upfront costs for small businesses. Some people want to do web EDI instead of doing integrated EDI. Web EDI is where you're doing a lot of things manually through the systems and everything else, and you're not reliant on an EDI provider or service or anything like that. So maybe it's a low overcost. I just talked with a company that literally is bringing on their first EDI company. They don't have an ERP. They're doing everything through spreadsheets and controlling things that way. Well, web EDI, manual entry, right now makes sense. Why invest in an ERP or something on the back end where you can do it through manual intervention, and maybe you can automate as much of that manual entry as possible, depending on the provider that you select. So maybe you have fill in fields where a purchase order comes in, it knows that you need to create an 855. When you go to create the 855 or the purchase order acknowledgement, as much of the information from that purchase order gets over into the 855. Wouldn't that help? So those are small steps that you can do. What are the cons for manual processing? Time consuming, error prone, user intervention, higher risk of compliance issues and chargebacks, inefficiencies where the business needs to scale. So if you're manually doing purchase order acknowledgements, or you're manually doing things with healthcare claims, or whatever the business may be, reaching out to carriers to find out about your shipments, all of those things that take people to do is an efficiency. It's inefficient and it's time consuming. Because if you can automate it and you can get the computer to do it, you can actually take your time for tasks that actually mean a lot more to the business. And if you think you're going to scale when you're doing manual interventions, there's an issue. It's not going to happen, because imagine doing 50 purchase orders in a week. You can do it. You're keeping along. You're trudging along. Is it favorable? Do you like doing it? No, not really. What if all of a sudden that 50 becomes 500, 5,000 in a week? How many people do you need to add to do that? Whereas if you have it automated, You're not adding more people. Maybe you're just adding a little bit more bandwidth in the computer system. Those are the things that you have to think about. Those are the things that you have to worry about when you're sitting down and you're going, hey, what does this mean from a manual process to full automation? Full automation doesn't occur at the snap of your finger. It takes a lot of work to get things fully automated, but that work is invaluable because once it is fully automated, you can just keep taking on more and more jobs, more and more work, adding in more trading partners while not having to necessarily add in more staff to handling those things. So people always say and relate it to hey, this would cost me $100,000 to get these things handled in a more automated fashion. Okay. How many people is that? How many actual hours of work is that when you sit down and look at your ROI or the return on your investment? So start thinking in that mindset. Start thinking of, and logging what that time is. I have had clients literally log how long does it take you to create an ASN if you're doing it manually, or how long does it take you to create an invoice and reprocess or re-enter that information. Figure it out. It's 2 minutes maybe per invoice, or 2 minutes or 5 minutes per ASN. Well, okay. So at what point is that going to be way too much time? And how quick are you going to hit that? Because as organizations, we have sales teams that are trying to gear us and get us into larger accounts or increase our load with a certain account or whatever it may be, but that's their sales role. Our role from an EDI API integration is to make our jobs easier and less reliant on us, so that we can then take our time and allocate it to something else that's going to help to grow the business even more, or help where we truly need to use our brain power and figure out the if, then, what, else, like all of those things that we can't put into a system. As things go on and as things progress and as we get into the world of AI, machine learning, all of those things, we're building that repository. We're building the automation. We're building all of that stuff. So manual processes hopefully will start to diminish and go lesser. It's better in my mind to add in automation sooner rather than later. Because when I see people doing it later, you're scrambling after the fact. You're scrambling to add it in as your business is also ramping. So now you have two things that are really pressing against each other. Where had you done it when maybe the volume has become steady or isn't where you exactly want it to be, it's an easier thing to take on. Think about those things. Think about how all of that works together as you're looking at your manual processes versus your automated processes. And you're figuring out what can you automate, even if it's small steps. And if you can't figure it out, take down the time, figure out what those processes are, figure out your pain points, and come to an organization like mine to say, hey, this is what I have. Can you help me to figure out how to make it better when it comes to EDI, API, and integrations? We'll sit down, we'll have a meeting, and we'll go through it. So those are what I wanted to get across today. Is I just really wanted to hone it in and get you understanding and get you thinking of the manual processes versus the full automation and how to find that right balance. Sometimes I always tell people go towards that full automation as much as possible. And sometimes you just can't, because maybe there's rules and whatever that are in place that it's going to be way too hard and too difficult for us to get away from that manual process. So we just have to build it into where we can maybe make up time elsewhere. Again, Jim Gonzalez, EDI Support, LLC. I always love trying to share some knowledge, share some insight of different things that we see and that we have going on. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. If there's comments, likes, anything that you want to put out there that you would like to see us talk about or shed some light on, or any of those things. Again, I don't know everything. We seem to come across a lot of different things. So don't hesitate to say, make a comment, give a like, share some insight, give some things that you'd like to talk about. I'm always here. I'm readily available. Check us out on our LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Discord server. And you'll also see me throwing comments on Reddit. So we're trying to be everywhere, just trying to give a little bit of advice, a little bit of insight, and helping people out. I hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday, and I will talk to everybody later.
Elevate your business today with EDI that cares.